tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Recently, somebody came to visit the monastery and were talking about their experience practicing the Dhamma during lockdown. And I've had a few of these conversations, and mostly people talk about the challenges of having practiced, maybe being restricted to their home, not being able to travel, staying in one building, an apartment or a house with the family or partner, and all the different challenges that brought up. And this person said, well, there were those challenges, but their most enduring memory from the lockdown, which in Melbourne was quite long, many months, their most sort of prominent memory and what they took away from lockdown was actually a very good meditation experience. Just once in a period of, say, 6 months, but they had on one occasion, they did regular meditation practice every day, but they had one occasion where all the conditions seemed to come together, and practicing meditation, this lady was putting effort into practicing mindfulness of breathing, letting go of the distractions, keeping alert, keeping awake, and everything seemed to work. Everything fell into place, and the mind gradually let go of the body and the sensations and the sounds, and went into a very deep state of samadhi, peace, where she said it was the prominent feeling was one of completeness. The mind was feeling very complete in itself, within the body, that could no longer feel the body, just this awareness of the mind alone, and an awareness that the mind didn't need anything else to be happy, because it was complete. So there was, at that time, no desires coming up. And of course, if you practice meditation every day in an unusual situation like lockdown, well, you're probably aware of your mind every day, and like many meditators, you'll be aware that you want peace, you want awareness, you want mindfulness, you want wisdom and understanding, you want many things from your practice, and often you feel a little bit disappointed with yourself and how things are going. But when you have the one good meditation, it really sticks out, doesn't it? Because it's what you've been working towards. So she said that's what she remembered mostly about her lockdown, that one really powerful, memorable meditation experience. And she said it was very inspiring for her own practice, to give her energy and motivation to keep going, even though it was a one-off. But she also could see that it was the fruits of all those other meditations where things didn't seem to be going so well. And this, I think, is a very common experience for meditators, Buddhist practitioners in general, is that we will occasionally have a very good experience where we drop all our suffering and we realize very clearly that the mind can be happy on the inside and content and complete, and there's that awareness that really it doesn't need anything else to be happy. When we treat it right, we look after it, we train it, we develop it, we can experience that. And it's such a powerful experience, well, that can, you can remember that for months, even years, and it guides you on, leads you on in your practice, gives you a lot more confidence. And what we're normally experiencing is, we may have a certain level of peace and comfort in our life, and that's reflected in our mental state. But at the same time, there's often that kind of nagging mental agitation in the back of the mind, the opposite of the feeling of completeness. It's the feeling of anxiousness, desire to get something else other than what you've got. We've got ambitions, plans, desires, and so on. And that nags away at the back of our mind, the back of our experience. Even if we're doing pleasurable things, sometimes that sense that there has to be more, or I need more. So this is a very important point in why we practice meditation, is because we're getting in touch with the mind itself on the inside, as it were. And it gives us this reference point. You might call this the development of Samadhi. And the Buddha always said Samadhi is a basis for the arising of wisdom, understanding. They develop together, but when we do have a taste of the peaceful mind, and it gives you this reference point for everything else starts to be put into perspective. Because you notice normally when we're going about our business, we often have this sense of stress, anxiety, sometimes very strong, sometimes just a very subtle feeling in the back of our awareness, but it's there. And we associate that, in Buddhism we associate that with a sense of self. And when you have this experience of the peaceful mind on the inside, the sense of the mind that is complete, doesn't need anything else, one characteristic of that is the sense of emptiness of self. The mind, the sense of self that we normally identify with, say, our body, has disappeared. Feelings, whatever is arising, is not bothering us. Thoughts, views that we normally identify with as self have disappeared temporarily. Sight, sounds, taste, smell, touch, external senses are not bothering us at that time. So the normal things we identify with as self have gone, disappeared. So there's this sense of what we call experience of emptiness. Whereas normally, when we're going about our business, the sense of self is there, sometimes in a small way, sometimes very prominent. And you notice it tends to become more prominent when we experience suffering, stress. The moment we're caught into a stressful experience, the sense of self is probably at its, more or less, its strongest. When mindfulness and wisdom are not present in the mind is not calm, not alert, not aware, then the sense of self seems to be at the strongest. That's associated with suffering. So the mind of calm, of peace, of samadhi gives you this reference point where you can look back from a place of quietude, emptiness, and recognize how we cause suffering by identifying with everything as self, as me, mine, myself, a person, a being. And we kind of carry along all the baggage of this personal identification with body and mind all the time. Most of the time, unconscious, unaware that we're doing it. But as we come to practice meditation, well, we do become aware of what we're doing. And that's why there's this sense of a bit of a battle or struggle as we practice meditation. Just now we're doing breathing meditation, and you'll notice your mind going straight off into thoughts about your work, your family, what's going on, or concerns about your body, your health, your posture, how you feel. This sense of self we bring up into our experience, and when you're meditating you'll see that, and that sets up sort of a struggle in the mind as the mind keeps forming an opinion or a view or a train of thought around its experience, which is how this sense of self manifests. And we're trying to bring the mind back to the breath. So it's a bit of a struggle, but you might call this struggle the noble struggle. It's a good struggle. It's one of the most important struggles a human being can make and get involved in their life, because you're struggling to establish clarity, wisdom, insight into the true nature of your experience. So even though it is a struggle and an effort you're working with your endless thoughts and memories, emotional states, feelings, stuff coming up all the time, or else stuff in the body, aches and pains, feelings. You're working with all that, but that effort to establish mindfulness and use the breath as a way to center your mindfulness is a noble effort, it's a noble struggle, because it's ennobling your mind, bringing the mind to a higher place where it can look back at experience and see it, understand it more clearly for what it is. As we know, the center of the Buddha's teachings is the Four Noble Truths, and we call them noble because the more we come to penetrate and understand and see these noble truths in our experience, the more they ennoble our mind. They bring the mind up to a higher, a better place. So all that effort you're making, don't despair, don't give up, don't look down on it, because that tends to be going back towards creating this sense of self again. We form opinions about our meditation. I'm no good at meditation, I can't do it, I've got too much bad karma, or I'm too busy, or I don't have what it takes, etc., etc. We, even out of this practice of meditation, we'll create a fresh self as we're doing it, and then attach to that image of ourself in our own meditation. We're learning to drop that habit, change that habit, bring the mind back to the breath, which of course doesn't really have an owner. The breath is just the breath. And we're letting go of that sense of the owner, the person, the being, and allowing the mind to merge with the breath. And that's why we feel better, feel more relaxed. That's why joy and rapture arise, if only briefly and in small amounts. The more you let go of that identification with everything else as self, the more the mind is released. And these qualities of joy, rapture, happiness that come up internally as we meditate are an expression of that release of self. So we're actually getting happier when we let go of self and experience emptiness. Before one has done that, part of the struggle in practicing mindfulness and training the mind is, the mind doesn't feel confident to let go yet. It's got its own reasons not to let go. If I let go, then I won't get this, I won't get that. Maybe I won't be as happy with this letting go. It doesn't sound very good, does it? Letting go means you've got nothing. It's really something you have to experience little by little as you practice. And it's as you experience the fruits of letting go, you feel happier, and that gives you the confidence to carry on. Many people, as they practice meditation, different formations of the sense of self will come up from time to time, sometimes very strongly. identifying very strongly with a certain thought or a certain aspect of who you think you are, this sense of self, and that will come up like a kind of a block, an obstacle. It could be an extension of who you think you are as well. Like if you have children, it could be thoughts of children or parents or family. It could be thoughts of work, concern about our own health, so on. The sense of self will come up from time to time very strongly. And that's where you have to rely on, partly on remembering the teachers, the Buddha and our teachers such as Ajahn Chah, to get some strength just to push on, carry on when you may have one of these blockages. It's some kind of big sense of self that just sticks in your mind and you don't seem to be able to let go of or put it down. Your mind can't turn to the breath. It just keeps thinking about holding on to that. If you think of the teachers, that gives you a little bit of strength to carry on. And then you have to have that, the courage of the one who really wants to free themselves from suffering. If you can sense that where you're holding on is a sense of suffering, and you'll continue to suffer as long as you're holding on, then maybe you're willing to let go a little bit more than before. So the practice of meditation is particularly a practice of letting go of whatever it is we identify with as self, the baggage we carry on. And we're using the breath as a way to do that, a skillful means, turning the mind to the breath to allow us to let go of everything else. So when we meditate, we don't have to be solving all the problems of the world and thinking everything through, although sometimes there will be an appropriate time for problem solving and sorting things out. But really our first aim is to develop mindfulness of the breath and let go of everything else. There's a time for problem solving, but there's a time for developing strong mindfulness. And when we're doing what we call formal meditation, that's the time for just dropping everything else and developing this quality of mindful awareness in the present moment, clear comprehension, clear understanding of what we're doing, and dropping everything else. And it's a skill that we develop over time, and those little struggles, those little efforts to let go of the sense of self-identity which comes up all the time, they gradually have their effect. If you practice regularly, you get to see things that you've seen before come up again, and you can say, I know that, I've been there, I've seen that before. It's not so important because I know it, I can let it go. Maybe you've let it go before, or at least you've seen that particular way of thinking or that feeling, or that particular sensation. You've known it, you've seen it before, and there was no problem letting it go or facing it last time and letting it go, so this time I'll do it again. And the idea is slowly you're building that experience in how to do that, getting better at it, getting better at letting go. And you have to trust in that, the cumulative nature of this process. Little by little, both your effort, your mindfulness, your wisdom are improving. So then one day things may fall into place, and you maybe from many, many moments and practices of meditation in the past, suddenly all the conditions are right. Maybe you can't really put your finger on it, what is it that works today or on that day, but you trust in the process that having trained and practiced many times, things start to happen in a good way. You're getting better at letting go, dropping things, particularly the body. Like the Buddha said, we're fettered or bound to the world by these 10 fetters you hear about. And the first of them is Sakkaya Ditthi, is what the Sotapanna, the stream winner, lets go of. It's the natural identification with the body as a self. So most meditators are working with this much of the time, the feelings of the body, the attachment and identification with the body, how it looks, how it feels, the sense data we're getting through our eyes, ears, nose and so on, seeing it all as self. So when you're putting attention on the breath, you're directly confronting a habit that you've brought along with you for many, many lifetimes. It's the natural identification with body as self. So you have to be very patient and very brave to keep bringing your mind back to letting go of that, letting go of painful feelings that may arise, letting go of feelings of tiredness, all the images we carry around about this self. Really, the Sakkaya Ditthi applies to all the 5 khandhas, body, feelings, memory, thought formations, and sense consciousness. But in its simplest form, it's the body itself. So as you're sitting watching the breath, you can't help but form an opinion. My breath, I can't find it, it's too rough, too coarse, where is it? And then you start thinking about something else. So you're learning just to calm the mind, calm the body, calm the mind, bringing attention back to the breath, and just knowing the breath as it is, without adding on this sense of self. And the reason we feel relaxed and calm and a sense of happiness is arising is because that sense of self starts to dissipate after a while. If you keep putting in the effort, keep doing it, mind and breath start to merge, or the mind gets immersed in the breath, and the sense of the body goes inwards. We begin our meditation, we're feeling how the air in the room is, whether it's hot or cold. We're still caught into sounds and sights, so we close our eyes. We teach ourselves not to worry or bother ourselves about the sounds we hear. Then we have thoughts come up, and those thoughts are based on past sense contact. So we have thoughts about what we've done, places we've gone to, things we've said and done, memories and so on. We're dropping all that and bringing the mind just to the breath as it is, and developing this ability just to know the breath as it is, without a sense of self there. And the more mindfulness we can put onto the breath, the more we're dispersing the sense of self, the solidness of the body, the solidness of the mind, and the sense of self starts to disperse, and attention moves inwards. So normally we're experiencing the world through our senses. Now as you're meditating, you're now experiencing the world through the mind, within the body, as it were. And you're looking at the body now from a place on the inside, the internal body, you might say, or sometimes they say the breath body becomes much more prominent. And you may find there are things you need to adjust as you bring your attention inwards. Just as we adjust our physical posture, mentally there'll be things that you need to adjust, certain mental feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, you need to adjust. You may find the energy within your body moving around. There may be certain areas that you're feeling pain. You may have to be very patient with that, very calm, maybe even send your attention to that area where the pain is. And you might find that pain starts to ease off or slacken off, or at least you can cope with that pain, be at peace with it without reacting with aversion. All of this is going on internally. You've brought your attention inwards, and you're now much more aware of the body from the inside. So you're able to, you might say, let go of some of this Sakkaya Ditthi as you're staying with the breath and staying within the body as you meditate. If you haven't done it much before, then of course when you finish your meditation, this inner awareness will disappear quickly, and we'll be back to the thinking mind, doing things, going here, going there, using our senses. And maybe the level of mindfulness and awareness is not very strong. But if you practice regularly, then as you finish your meditation, it's not that it all just disappears, all that inner awareness of the body from the inside, the breath body. It may stay with you for a little longer, particularly if you're in a retreat situation or living in a monastery or Buddhist center, then you can extend your practice of mindfulness, sitting, walking meditation, or just occupying yourself with very quiet activities, and extend the period of developing mindfulness and awareness of the body from the inside. But if you're busy and you have to go off and look after a family or work or interact with other people, it'll be quite challenging. And that's why we also practice keeping the 5 precepts, practicing general mindfulness in daily life of what we say, what we do, just to try and avoid creating too much negative karma or too much confusion and regret through our actions, so that the next time we do have some time to come and sit and do some formal meditation or walking meditation, we can return to this inner awareness more quickly. Or sometimes even as you're going through your day, the inner awareness, your mind will turn to that inner awareness when you've got a few moments free. But as you develop your meditation over time, days, weeks, months, however long it may take, you're becoming much more aware of this inner body, the body from the inside, how you feel internally, how your emotions manifest. Emotions manifest internally as well as externally. Externally, they come out as we speak, as we look at things, interact with the world. But on the internal level, it's more on the level of feelings, isn't it? Feelings of pleasure, feelings of pain, sometimes subtle, sometimes very coarse, very gross. Fear always brings a certain feeling with it. So the more we practice mindfulness directed to the body, and maybe using the breath as our focal point, the more we're changing the way we look at this body and seeing it more as a process of causes and conditions arising and passing away, different sensations, pleasant, unpleasant. We're more aware of ourselves in terms of the breath. And so then that sense of self disappears from time to time at least. I have more awareness of just the process of the body changing, going through its life, feelings arising, passing away based on our karma, what we've said and done and what we've remembered and what we think. And this solid sense of self, that view, that identification with everything as a solid sense of self starts to disappear. Occasionally it might completely evaporate, if only for a while, and give you a whole new way of looking at things. It's like, oh, that sense of me disappeared, and at that time you should be very happy, even though the sense of self has gone. There's no dukkha in the mind, there's no stress, no suffering. And then there'll be times where, it's partially there, partially gone. Sounds a bit strange maybe, but you'll be aware, sometimes you're kind of half peaceful. You have a certain level of inner peace and awareness, but then there's still some dukkha arising in your experience, and that's where you have to contemplate, isn't it? To see where you're maybe creating some suffering out of your experience. There's some pain, there's some disturbance in the mind, there's some confusion, or there's some strong desire that's sort of there. And you're learning to manage that and ultimately see it as impermanent, as not self, but that takes time. So sometimes, some parts of the practice, you just keep coming back to the same old thing. But as you become a little bit more aware and have more inner peace, more calm, you're able to deal with it better. And maybe you can reduce things. So like before some experiences made you really angry, certain things people say or certain parts of your day, your routine bring up aversion. Before that could be a full-on experience that you express in your speech, the way you look, and of course the way you think, and then how you feel. But now as you're becoming more aware of the inner body and the breath, the same situation arises, but the level of agitation and suffering is reduced, and you're just experiencing more as on the level of maybe feelings. Somebody says something, it still brings up a feeling of tension, but it doesn't have to go on to be displayed into words or expression on a face or whatever. You're more just experiencing that feeling, and then you have a chance to allow that feeling to arise, pass away, within this framework of being mindful of the body, mindful of the breath. You might call that progress in the practice. We don't even necessarily have to verbalize everything. In the beginning of our practice, this sense of self is mainly just all the thoughts, the running commentary we've got in our mind, thinking about everything, remembering things, forming opinions about everything. But as you become more in touch with the breath body, maybe it's just feelings arising, feeling of tension, feeling of pleasure, feeling of pain, feeling of discomfort, arising and passing away, and you can keep it on that level, at least sometimes. Then you can really see how maintaining your mindfulness, guarding over your mind, being mindful of body, being mindful of feelings, there's a chance to really see things as not self, not cling on to them, not hold on to them. They're just experiences that are rising into your consciousness and then passing away. And you'll notice then when you lose your mindfulness, what's it like? Well, you go back to creating a sense of self out of everything. You hear some words that you don't agree with, somebody criticizes you or has a different opinion on something than you, and you're no longer aware of the feeling and the awareness of that from the inside. It's now the words, what they mean, and you just get caught into a negative train of thought, and it maybe forms a hard memory that you carry around with you. So if we keep coming back to practicing mindfulness of breathing regularly over and over again, you're interrupting that process. You're changing the inner way your mind and body operates a little bit. You're no longer just creating self out of every experience, pleasant, unpleasant, I like this, I don't like that, I want this, want that, or don't want that. You're bringing the mind back to this inner place where it's more calm and aware, and you're still aware of what you like, what you don't like, but now you have a chance to contemplate, to see on a deeper level. These experiences, they arise, they pass away. When we read a Buddhist sutta, often we have this problem. You see the Buddha, or you read that the Buddha is saying, seeing is just seeing, hearing is just hearing, tasting just tasting. And that's quite a challenge, just as an idea, to bring enough mindfulness up to just see, just hear, just taste. But when you're practicing meditation and becoming more aware of this inner breath body and the inner awareness of the mind itself, and if you've had a chance to experience a mind when it just calms down, becomes very centered and very content within itself, then you got a chance to have more of this detached awareness, at least for periods of time. And you can just see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and you're aware, you're watching those experiences, but you're watching them arise, pass away without getting involved with them, without building up a sense of self again out of them. It's just knowing sights as sights, sounds as sounds. As Luang Por Chah used to say, when the mind is calm and mindfulness is present, then you hear a sound, but you don't go out and get involved with the sound. Don't go and disturb the sound. You just know it, and then you let it go. When we're not very mindful, we make something out of it. So we're interested in that sound, whether we like it, we don't, who is it, what is it? And the mind fills itself up with a whole bunch of information, and the sense of self is back. And more often than not, we create some suffering out of the experience. So practicing meditation, you're bringing your mind in to develop this inner awareness, the ability to watch and learn from experience. And the Buddha encouraged us to look and observe how experience is made up of the impermanent, the changing nature of phenomena, the unsatisfactory or the dukkha of phenomena, constantly changing, arising, passing away, cannot last, cannot bring us lasting happiness. The inner mind that's well trained can see that, experience that and know that. And to see that these things are not a self. You're dispersing the sense of self, bringing the mind back to a place of inner peace, inner awareness, without having to create a whole personality out of it. So don't underestimate this practice of meditation. We call it a noble struggle, a noble effort, because it is raising the level of our consciousness, giving us a sense of space, giving us the ability to look back at our experience without grasping and attaching onto everything, but just knowing things as they are. And the more we can get in touch with that and find that and experience that, the more peace we can find in our lives, the happier we'll be. In Thailand, they call it the mind that's gone on the inside, that's peaceful within itself. They call it Jit Yim, which means the smiling mind. Nowadays, everybody uses little emojis, like little smiley faces, when they're writing texts and things. It's like you put a smiley face on your mind when you experience the inner mind. So if your mind is smiling, then whether your experience is pleasant or unpleasant, you have a chance to really know it for what it is. It's just sense objects, sense impressions arising, passing away, thoughts arising, passing away. You don't have to get involved with them. You can just sit there calmly watching. And this is something we can actually experience if we practice. It's not something just for the books. It's not something just for ancient old monks sitting in the forest or in a cave on a mountain somewhere to experience. Everyone can experience this, even in the midst of a busy city, in the midst of lockdown or busy work life routine. If you keep practicing, there may be moments where you experience the inner mind of happiness. This is what we're aiming for in our practice. It helps us to change our whole attitude to life, to ourselves, to the world, to understand better what things are. So maybe for tonight I'll just say this much to encourage you in your practice, and in a moment we can have a Q&A session.